Hello and welcome to number 9 of the Inventive Marketing Club. I've realised over the course of either advertising this club or in the introductions, I've changed the name from the Inventive Marketing Club, the Internet Marketing Club. So it is the Inventive Marketing Club. Anyway, on this month, we're talking about blogging and content strategy. This is actually a workshop I've run a couple of times, so it should be really good. But we're going to look at developing a blog content strategy, really, to get a website found online. That's the main focus, although we dive into lots of different areas. Before we do, can I make sure I'm coming through loud and clear? Let me know if you can't hear me. For those either not here or who haven't joined, I just want to talk a little bit about the club. Really, it's a monthly webinar for anyone who wants to really get ahead in marketing. It also gives you an opportunity to have a Q&A, ask questions of me and the community. Really to help motivate and move people along in terms of their marketing, because it can be a tricky thing. I work quite closely with Claire, who's our podcast editor, but also works with me on the marketing. And that's really helpful to me in terms of moving things forward. And really getting some external opinion. Also, I use and abuse our clients when I speak to them about their thoughts and feelings in terms of marketing. And I know from experience that having someone to sort of talk to about these things or listen to what's happening in the world at the moment is very helpful. So moving on, just a few questions to look at in terms of blogging. I'd be interested to know how you use your blog and what you find useful in terms of how it works for your company, and what tactics you've got for creating content, which I think can be one of the most difficult areas, certainly if people just dive into creating content rather than taking a step back and working their way there. So firstly, what is a blog? I think there's lots of different ways you can look at a blog, and I've had people coming to one of these, certainly this workshop before, and thinking a blog is just something where they read about people's lives, almost like a diary. It can be that, and that's certainly where it started. But to me, I look at it as something where it could be the company news portal. So it's really an insight into what the company is doing. It could be helpful information. So it may not be a diary style. It may just be a way of publishing information on a regular basis. And that's the way I look at it, certainly from a business point of view, but blogs do flourish from a personal point of view. There might be a going green blog where someone is exploring experiments in removing chemicals from their house, or trying to use sustainable resources more, or a vegan blog where they're trying out different recipes for food. But from a business perspective, there's no reason that you need to deviate away from that. I think the personal aspect of a blog is what makes them so good. What is a blog for? Well, I use them particularly for lead generation. I think they're a really great way of putting content out there in a way that you can build links to important pages over time. You can use it to give an insight into your business. I think it's really good as a passive help desk, putting that information out there before people need it, to give credibility and influence. So that's one of the reasons we run our podcast, which comes out in blog format as well, as a way of hopefully giving people an insight into us and how we work, and the fact that we do keep our heads in the game, and also search optimization, which I've already mentioned. But why should we write one? It's hard work. You don't want to delve into starting a blog. And many people have with a website. They've just started doing one and then stopped. You can see the timeline stops maybe a couple of years back. They've lost the effort, or they're not able to find the energy to publish on a regular basis. So it's really important that once you know what you're doing, that you make sure that it's important to you to do. Otherwise, it's just going to fizzle. A couple of different reasons for it are, certainly from a business perspective, is getting more leads. So in terms of putting that content out there, you've got a chance of getting more leads in. You can educate your customers. I think that's always a win. It's not only going to help with inbound marketing, because you're seeding the internet with information that people may come into your website for, but also when people are going through the sales cycle, the more they know, the easier it is to work with them. But it also may be that your sales team can refer back to those pages. And tech support as well. I know I've spoken to many companies who have products where they provide technical support, and I encourage them to put that technical support on the web so that their customers can access it more easily, they can refer to it, and then it also helps with the sales cycle. So who will read it? So you know why you're doing the blog, but who's going to read it? And it's key to know who you're writing for. And you don't actually need to write a blog for all of your customers. It could be that your blog is just for people who are either super keen about your product, so they want to know the latest details and updates. They could just be influencers, so they could be people who work in the same field as you, but not necessarily are customers. And what they can do is help spread your company brand further and wide and help with referral. The way I look at this, really, if we want to understand who will read the blog, is to think about who are we writing for. We think about our best customers, particularly the ones that pay well and they're good referrers. And for me, I like them personally. They're friendly. And I've got to understand what they like, what it is about, what do we have that we can connect to their need. And we can do that with a persona. And this is often a good way of, once you've set out to start a blog, before you do any writing, is to understand what it is you're writing about, knowing that particular person. And it becomes easier if you can picture a couple of clients in your mind to think about when you're doing this. I often think about Alex from Communion. He's sort of not a typical customer, but a typical style of customer in terms of how he works. So I often think about Alex and what would be interesting for him. And also Eclipse. I often find a lot of work that we do with them is something that resounds with many other people. So often thinking about what their needs are and how I can help them can be quite useful. So two of our clients where they're actually slightly different in the way they approach. One's an architect, one specializes in helping install and maintain CCTV and other, and so that sort of monitoring hardware. So they have different needs and different audience, but in terms of those two clients, they're the ones I would focus on if I'm writing or producing anything generally. But what you can do to help you with that process is to produce something called a persona. Now, I know I've gone through this with many clients, but it's worth going through again. It's always worth revisiting your persona every so often, just to make sure it's up to date, make sure that you're really communicating with the right audience. And this is particularly useful if you're contracting out your copywriting. So if you're getting someone else to write your blog, then you need to make sure they have a really clear idea of who your customer are. So the key things on a persona are the motivation and pain. What is it that your customer needs? What are you producing, selling? What can you offer them that's going to tie in with their motivations and their pains, the issues that they have that you can fulfill? It's worth doing that first, because once you know that, that's going to help in understanding what text to write, what even how you describe your product. It's really important to understand what issues they have that you can connect with. But once you've got that, the next three things to work on are thinking about awareness, consideration, and decision. So thinking about how do the people become aware of you? How do they start considering you as an option? Even if it's quite a quick consideration process, but how do they consider that product as the right one to buy or your service is the right one to use, through to actually deciding? And they're reasonably discrete areas. You can think of awareness almost as the blogging side of things, but it's anything where you're doing to gain awareness from that particular customer, whether it's blogging, putting those blogs out there, advertising, events, workshops, anything where you're reaching out to people. And you want to think about what you can do to connect with your customers or potential customers who don't know you yet. And you're really using a lot of that motivation and pain to think about what needs do they have that they're already looking for, that we can put that out there. Particularly valued at blogging. It's where you might look at longer tail keywords and long searches where you're really drilling into a particular idea or problem that you can help solve. Then you move on to consideration, which is really where you are providing information to help them think about whether you're the right product. So that might be comparison. It might be certainly pricing pages. It might be how to use your product. It could be product videos in terms of how it works, testimonials, anything like that really that's going to help move people from knowing you to actually wanting to use your product. Then it's the decision part. What can you do to make buying it easy? What information do they need to know? I'm trying to think of something else. My mind's gone blank. Pricing again is very important at that point. And it could be further more detailed videos about exactly how that product would work once they've got it in place, or how to set it up. And really within those discrete areas, it's thinking about what content you can put out there and provide, whether it be a blog, video, podcast, workshops. It's really looking at that content. So this is something to do first before you do any marketing, really, particularly with a blog, is to think about what the motivation and pain is of your customer or customers, if you're going to split them up, and then thinking about the awareness, consideration, and decision of that customer, and really drilling into it. I know a couple of our customers have gone through exercises like this, and they've been very useful, and they've come back with lots of information where they've huddled around their team and really tried to understand the customer and just talk about them and try and articulate that into words. But you need to drill down. You need to keep asking the question, why? What is it they're interested in? Is that a true pain, or is they just saying that? And really drill into these, because you want to find out the detail. But don't be afraid to start somewhere and then work forward and review it every couple of months until you find that it's something that truly reflects your customer. Something that can be useful as well is to use testimonials. So collecting testimonials, however you collect them, whether it's through our app, say Hola, or Trustpilot, or you solicit them via email or phone. Collecting testimonials is a really useful way of identifying why people like you and what need you fulfilled in their language, in the words that they use. And that's crucially important. So testimonials are a really good way of starting this process off. Okay, so I'm going to try a little experiment now. I want to do a blog review and just sort of look through a blog and sort of just talk through it with people. It's a bit of an experiment because I do this in person and it works really well, but I've never done it on a webinar before, so you'll have to bear with me. So I am going to, so let's say, how do we do this? So who would like to put forward a blog? If not, we'll look through ours and we can scale that. So it's always the worst way webinars. So not used to being able to talk one-to-one. If I don't hear anything, I might actually pick on a customer. I'm not sure we want that. Okay, well, let's go through ours first. Let's use it as an idea. So what I will try and do, let's see if we can share the screen. Okay, so hopefully that's showing up. Nikki, thanks. What I'll do, Nikki, I'll come back to that. Let's walk through ours first. And please, if there's any feedback you've got, do fire away in here. But I'll just talk through it. And I'm going to try and be as objective as I can. Obviously, it's our blog, but it is old and it's in need of an update. So it's something I would be developing. So the aim of our blog when we produced it, and it has changed over time. I don't know if I can roll back to the early stages, right back in the midst of time. I don't know what we're going to see here. Yeah. So when we first started, we really we were focused on very specific things like 10 tips on copywriting. And I would have an assignment almost and say, I think we were working with Catherine from Hello Pippin at the time on producing those blog articles. And it's really, I need to attack these particular areas. So let's, can you write some content for me for those particular areas? So, which she did. And that worked quite well at the time. So you can see she's written a few here. Why bother to understand our customers? And she actually, wrote that back in 2011. So she actually wrote quite a long article, but we split it up at the time. Now that was so we could get sort of more bang for our buck in terms of having more articles going out. But actually that's something I would probably want to revert now. And I have been doing in terms of combining these blog posts together into something, into a larger, bigger post. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of blog articles out there that are quite thin, very low on content. They don't have many words in them. And so actually, if you have a bigger, bolder, longer blog and have fewer of them, you might actually have more impact. So that's one of the things that I would recommend on our blog, that actually it started off quite thin. And as part of a blog audit, I don't know if I'm going to talk about it as part of this because it's a bit of an extensive process, but it's essentially going through your blog and identifying what's working, what's not, and consolidating and refreshing. But if we go to the front again, it's actually changed a lot into sort of fewer blogs and more podcast episodes in here. So we actually have a few blog articles coming through, and then more episodes. Changing to much more recently, if we go through to page 1, to mainly blog articles. So I've kind of swung from something which was a bit, I say easy, and I don't mean that anything by that, Catherine, but something easier in terms of putting the words on the page to something which costs a lot more in terms of time and production value to create a podcast, video podcast, put it on multiple places, and then put it up on our blog. I think we've actually swung the other way, and we need to sort of swing back a little bit to have a bit more of a balance between the different media on there, or maybe make more of the blogs actually sort of pull some elements out of it. Something I'm looking at doing in terms of our blog is, I really like the podcast. We're going to stick with doing that. But I actually put a lot of content out on Twitter. So I read articles and I'll share them on Twitter with a comment or not. What I'm looking at doing, because I think that's valuable, is to put that onto our blog. And actually, any content that I find interesting and I want to post, I'll start putting on our blog. So it becomes the one resource where people can go to see not only our podcast, but any up-to-date information, anything useful I've read, anything interesting I've found, that all goes on our blog. The reason for it's not just an attractor in terms of social media or search optimization, but it's something that people can regularly follow. And that will obviously go out to our social media account as well, and our newsletters. It's something we've actually experimented with on our newsletters in terms of pulling together a few blogs from us and then some other articles. I want to do that more on the blog because I think that's going to be more valuable. Also, something I've seen in other places is we've got our blogs split up with into 2 columns here. We've got our title, which hopefully engages, has a few keywords that people are interested in, and then a short introduction. I would actually like something more like the style of traditional blogs, actually, where you start at the top with the latest article, and then you can sort of roll down and read all the articles full on the page. The reason for that is you don't have to click in and out of the article. Sure, every article will have its own page, which is really useful from the point of view of a link back in from social media. But it's also a bit of a pain when people want to read. I think some of the other blogs I've read, when people find it useful, it becomes a bit more like a timeline feed, a social feed. And you can actually just scroll through and read and continue reading and gain a lot more information that way. So that's something I'm looking to change as well. So I think the blog's effective. I think it's okay. This masthead image changes every time and sort of relates back to the latest article we've published. But I think there's a lot more we can do in terms of turning this into a blog that people will revisit regularly. There are some other blog styles, and we will implement them in a slightly different way, where for new people come to the site, actually trying to present them with top level information, like here's your top 10 tips on marketing, or here's the most influential podcast episodes that you should listen to. I think pulling out content like that is really useful and can be quite beneficial, certainly for new people coming back to the site. Right, so Nikki, I'm going to, before we do, let's just dive into one of these most recent ones as well. So I'll go into this recent one where I interviewed Martin here. So this is quite a typical podcast episode. We've got a very short introduction. We've got our sponsor here, straight into the video. I've tried to simplify that as much as possible over time because effectively that's what people are looking at. And then just show notes. What I'd actually like to do here is pull out some of the core information. There'll be useful comments from Martin or me as we go through. It would be great to pull out some of those and put them as quotes. The reason we haven't done it is just time. It takes a long time to do that. And it's best done really in terms of me as I go through, if there's anything interesting, or Claire when she's editing, be able to pull out quotes. But just something we haven't got time to do. But I think it'd be actually quite useful from a search engine optimization point of view, but also people to follow along and just sort of catch the glimpse, find out if they're really interested in watching it by having some additional content there. But anyway, let's move on to clips here. Thanks, Nikki, for posting this. Let's see if I can paste this in. So Nikki, while this loads, do you want to just tell us a little bit about this blog and what your thoughts and feelings are on it? Just a couple of lines of text while I wait for it to load. While you're typing. So what I like about this blog is we've got a nice big masthead, but it's not, I like our big image, but maybe it's a bit overpowering. With this, we've got balance. We've got an image, which is sat on the right-hand side, plus we've got this huge title really that jumps out. And if that's the blog title that's going to be interesting for you, or you're landing it from a social page, it's actually really useful because you can see you're on the right place. So I find that particularly useful. Right, Nikki, your comments are, it's a helpful blog for customers to show them what the 12 guidelines from the Surveillance Commissioner are. So this is in terms of data surveillance code of practice, right? I like the idea of that. I wonder if it's possible to bring up those 12 guiding principles a little bit. Because if I'm looking at this as someone jumping in from a social media article or maybe even from a newsletter, it feels like a bit of a wall of text before we get to those 12 bullet points. And often when I think about, or when I've seen people do writing, or a general rule of thumb is to take what you've written at the end and put that at the beginning, because usually that's where you drill down and get to the point of what you're trying to achieve. And then you can always go back into detail again. So you capture their interest, make sure they're in the right place, give them the headline information, and then delve into the detail. So I wonder, you've got these 12 points here, 12 principles. I wonder if there is a way of either having this section higher up, and it may not work because they're quite short already, just having your refined version, possibly slightly higher up. So that means that people, when they're looking above the fold, are going to see it. And by above the fold, I mean on the page without having to scroll. Nikki also says we are looking at extracting some of the principles and simplifying them in videos. Now that I like the idea of, and that would be perfect as something that can go at the top. So you have a short introduction, people know what you're talking about, short introduction to just crystallize that a little bit more, and then a video. And to be honest, if you've got a video and the video feels like it's active and it's got people in it who's going to explain what these principles are, I think that's going to work really well. And it would be interesting for you to measure how this blog post has worked and how it works when you have a video on there, and see the difference in how long people stay on it and whether people go to other pages. So yeah, that would be really a good experiment in terms of having that and having that video high up. I have seen a trend, and this may be worth experimenting with. I have seen a trend where people have actually, it is an article which I know has a video in it because that's what the masthead image says, but actually the video is slightly lower down. Now, I wonder if that's a way of drawing people further down the page to get to the video. I'm not sure if that's advertising driven in terms of the numbers, but it's not something I like the idea of. I think if you're driving people to a video, get them to video. If they're interested, then you've got more information for them there. Yeah, so I like that. And really with this one, there aren't so many call to actions. I think you've got one here, you know, if we can help. But I wonder, yeah, I don't think there's any more call to action you can do there. It's just providing some information, but it might be worth investigating that. Great. Thank you for letting me look at that. We haven't got any more, so I won't drill any more information in. But the point of this is, it's really worth looking at your blog, and criticizing it, maybe getting some customers to actually review it and give them your feedback. Or just working with someone else, you know, maybe criticizing other blogs, having a look through other blogs, see what you like and what you don't like. I think it's a really good way of getting an understanding of what works. So thanks for doing that. Okay, so let's get into it. There are 3 types of content broadly. You've got helpful pieces of content, you've got topical content, and you've got stuff that's related to your product or service. I would say that where possible, you want to focus more on the helpful content. So you want to provide videos, podcasts, blogs on something that is providing an answer to a question. How do I do this? How do I fix this? What's the latest? How do I buy? What's the comparison of X versus Y? Those sort of things aren't really useful. They tend to be timeless to some degree, unless the product is fast moving and it's superseded by something else. So it's worth the effort putting the time in. So if you want to do articles on like choosing CCTV, comparisons between different things, technical advantages, they stay around for a little while. Topical, however, might get found more easily. It might be easier for you to promote on social media or to sort of build up some commentary on that. But it's got to fit in with a topic. And by topic, it could be, if Game of Thrones is on, tying some pun into that, which people want to do often, or working in with something that's going on with, in the political environment. There's lots of big things at the moment, or even small things. Maybe there's the London Marathon, you tie into that. So finding something and tying in your content into that. Even if it's using content you've already got and just tying that in on social media, it is good, and it's more likely to get more engagement initially, quite potentially, but it's short-lived, because once that topic dries up, then so's the links to your content. Then you've got product or service. So this is anything really where you're talking about your service, not necessarily sales content, but it's much more about you as a company rather than them as a customer. And I would focus much more on the helpful and topical side of things. So here's just a little example. So helpful could be how to file a VAT return, how to plan your business cash flow, how should I price my services. It's odd. I actually use the idea of or examples of an accountant when I do a lot of these presentations, but we don't have any accountants on our books. Maybe it's a subconscious cry for more accountant clients. Then topical. So what does auto enrollment mean? That was topical. It's coming up to a point where people are starting to get the re-enrollment notices. So it could be that accountants want to put out content on that. What is IR35 and how will I know if it affects me? I don't even know what that is. Maybe I should read that article. And then things like product-based stuff. So this is much more about, do I need an accountant? And maybe going through your processes and procedures and comparing that to how, what accountants mean and why people use them. Benefits of cloud accounting with Xero. So that's a very specific article to explain why they should use Xero and so on your service. And then you got topic ideas. So I find the easiest, if you can remember them or write them down, is to log the questions the client ask, because they are things people want to know about. They're your customers want to know about them. And even if you find that particular question is a bit too niche, you can always broaden it out a little bit. It's one of the things I do with these webinars, is really to think about topics that people ask about commonly and then produce webinars about them. So hopefully they'll find their niche, because people are, and our clients are interested in them. Hints and tips, how-tos, clever ideas, insider info, secrets. You could even, if you want to, produce blogs or content where you want to learn or be better at something. Something I'm into at the moment, I like cooking. So one of the things I want to do is try and reduce the amount of meat we eat. Not become a vegetarian or vegan, but just reduce the amount of meat and experiment with that. Really try and find a way of producing things that taste just as good, but without those meat products. Just for fun, really. Now, if I were blogging on the sideline, which I'm not, then that might be something where I could start that, because I'm so keen to do that I'm going to put much more energy into doing that. You could do exactly the same thing in business. If you want to find out more about something, why not use all of that research and that effort that you're putting into that, almost the waste product of the knowledge that you're learning, and put that onto the website so people can find it. Again, our podcasts are great for that, actually. Our podcast is like the output of the things I'm going through each week and talking to other people. So rather than just talking to other people at networking and that knowledge being lost, we talk on the podcast and everyone can gain from that. So finding something you want to learn and be better at can be a really good way at stimulating developing content. I mentioned this particular service a lot, but it's a really good way of coming up with topics, and it's called answerthepublic.com. And for those of you who don't know it, it's a way of you type in a keyword like bookkeeping in this case, and it comes up with the who, the how, the will, where, which, and so on of all the different questions in and around bookkeeping or feature bookkeeping. A lot of them may not make sense, but some of them can be useful then to stimulate a blog post. And you might say, actually, bookkeeping, what you need to know. That can be quite useful then, as that could almost become a title directly to become a blog article on your website or a video. So that is a really useful tool for doing this. And one of the reasons it's useful is because this content isn't made up. It comes from Google. So what Answer the Public have done is they've queried Google with lots of keywords and then pulled out the answers that Google gives them, or the questions that Google gives them, and the suggestions for questions, and then pulled them into their database to produce this system. Well worth checking out. Lots of fun, silly video on there. It's a really good tool. Answerthepublic.com. So you've understood your audience. You know you really want to be writing some helpful, topical, and product-based content on a regular basis. Not too much of one or the other. Oh, it's actually more helpful than product, but on a regular basis. It's still important to make sure that each piece, and I think it's even more important now with Google the way it is, to make sure that everything is as good as it can be. In an SEO talk I did, and I think I mentioned this on a previous webinar, it says you really want to make your content 10 times better, at least, than the competition. Because if you do that and you're pushing that hard with writing or developing good content, then it will make it's going to make a difference. And a little checklist I've got is basically, is it based around a relevant topic? Is it relevant to what you're doing? Because if it's not a problem. It doesn't mean you can't blog about it, but it may not benefit you from a search engine optimization point of view. Are you adding value, or are you just copying and pasting something else? So in the example of me wanting to repost interesting articles I find online, I think the value, there's two layers here. The value is, one, I become a place where people can go to find that content rather than not knowing, because there's so much out there. So they just come to my site and they find links that will be useful in terms of learning about marketing. But also there may be some commentary. I'm useful because I've read the article and I might pull out the quote that is pertinent to the article, and that may make you want to read it. Otherwise, it's just a link. And everyone knows where titles can often betray the article that's behind them. So having someone to do that work for you can be quite valuable. And I'll show you a site that I like that does that for Mac technology. So add value. Think about, are you adding value to the internet as a whole, or are you just regurgitating someone else's piece of work? Do people desire to see it? Do you desire to see it? Do you read about the article? Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think customers like that. It's providing some useful information, and I think they're going to want to see it because it's talking about the latest firmware and how you might use a particular piece of hardware, or it's giving you a bit of insider information or tips and tricks. Making sure people want to see it is really important. And if you can, will they share it? If you can develop a bit of content that people go, bloody hell, that's really good, I must share that with someone, that is so interesting, it's remarkable, as Seth Godin says, then that's great, because it's going to spread further. That may not always be your primary aim, but it's certainly good if you can think about that. Do they desire to see it, and will they share it? Okay, going to talk a little bit about keywords and SEO, not too much, but it is important if you're writing a blog and to understand that process, really. But I always think about when you write each blog piece, if you're developing and using it for SEO, you need to know what it's focused on, and how is it going to benefit your product. Now, we did have run into an instance recently where where been producing good blog articles from a client, but actually they seem to be almost working against themselves, because the product page that they've got is not ranking as highly as the blog, which is doing even better, and it's outranking the product page, which is the thing we want to show. And it's called keyword cannibalization. And so in that sense, it's almost over-optimized for that particular keyword, which is fine. As long as people come through to the blog, then they can move through to the product later. It might even be a better way of seeing that product. but really thinking about the keywords that each blog targets, make sure it's not cannibalizing your main products, but it's talking about the same topic. So I try and think of an example. Let's say you sell an electric whisk. You don't want to necessarily have a blog article that talks about exactly that same electric whisk. You might talk about the top key things you want in a whisk in 2019, or how to make a meringue, best whisk to use, or something like that. And then you can link. So the article is related to whisks. Don't know why I went there. But you can link through to that particular product, so it's going to help build links back to it. So anyway, thinking about the keywords you're going to use, and then using a couple of tools to actually analyze that. Oh, and making sure you add them into the blog title and the copy. That is important. I will show you where in a minute. So this is Google Trends. It's a really quick and dirty way to find out keywords. You can have up to 4 keywords in there. Last time I used it. And it gives you an idea of how many views those or searches those are being made about those keywords, but also the trend. And just forget the 2 terms here, tax advice and tax avoidance. That was a bit of fun for a workshop. But what you can see here is tax avoidance, we can see a downward trend on there, but actually tax advice, it's kind of slightly upward, if anything. So from there, if we've got 2 different keywords and we're not sure which way to go, we could use this and say, actually, tax avoidance is on the way down. So it doesn't have so many users, or something that is low now but is on the way up might be something we want to pick and sort of bet on the future. So this is Google Trends. It's quite fun. You can put any keywords in there. The only bit of advice I'd give is make sure you keep it short. If you have the phrases to be too long, they're just not going to work. It's not going to bring you back any data. The other thing which is really useful is to just do a search for a keyword. In this case, I've done bookkeeping, and scroll down the bottom, and Google is going to give you other examples of related searches that other people have done. Now, this is exactly the information that I believe Answer the Public are using to generate their questions. So it's really useful in seeing other people's searches. And that may give you an idea of not necessarily alternative keywords, but extending that phrase a little bit for your blog post. In terms of once you've developed your blog post and where it's important for phrases to go, there are 3, in fact 4 main areas. One is in the URL, so that's the bit at the top which is highlighted on screen. The other is in the title, so making sure that your blog post is focused on that keyword, put it in the title. That makes a huge difference, and also in the heading. And in WordPress, you can use something called Yoast to help control that. Gives you a bit more control over the placement of them. It even will give you an idea of whether you are optimizing the site correctly and you've got the keywords in the right place, and going through some of the things I've just shown you. So in Yoast, you can actually optimize the title yourself and put in a meta description, which is going to help when people see you in search engines. So this is a really useful tool, actually. Blog styles. So here's a few different blog styles. I've already talked about Eclipse and an Owl one, and I just want to run through a few more just to give you some ideas. First one up is Daring Fireball. Now this is a website I've looked at for a long time, probably since about 10 years now. Really simple design. I don't think it's ever changed. It's changed rarely since it was developed. But what I like about this is not the design. What I like about it is the content and the way it's structured. Or you could call that the design in terms of how it brings the information through. What I like about it is it's this stream, like a social timeline, of articles from the author, John Gruber. And most of the articles are what he calls a link list. And a link list, and I hadn't heard of it until this blog, but a link list is where he reads an article, he finds something interesting, he'll take a quote from that article and maybe a comment. So in the one we can see here, he's just pulling out, he's giving us a summary of what the article is, an extract that he finds interesting, and then well worth a listen. It's a highly rated blog, probably hundreds of thousands of people look at it daily. And so that is going to get some serious traffic. So anyone who can get seen on Daring Fireball is going to get some serious traffic. But the nice thing is, rolling just underneath that, he's got another article. So all his articles are in this reverse chronological order from the newest to the oldest, but you can just scroll through them in a list. You don't have to click in to each article to read it. I don't think any of them you need to do that. You can just roll through the page and read everything. the simplicity of that as a blog is pretty fab, I think, in terms of a blog where you are consuming information and you know that people are going to be coming back there regularly. It's maybe an old style of a blog because people don't always do that now. They'll be collecting their information from social media or feed readers. But in terms of just having it, once people are on there, being able to read an article, then roll on to the next one, I do like the idea of that. It doesn't encourage lots of page views, but it does help them read content. And if your aim is to get people to read content, this is a very efficient way of doing it. Another one here, similar style. They've got starting with the blogs, the latest blog at the top, rolling down as they go. But it's got a huge header, very colorful, very attractive, but a massive header really fills up a lot of the page before you start getting into the content, which I'm not so sure about, but it does look attractive compared to the last very simple one. Then there's ours, which I've already been through, but we've got these 2 columns. We keep it quite simple, but it's effectively 2 columns with this big masthead image. As I said, probably going to either remove that masthead image or make it a lot smaller and really focus on the blog more as a timeline and basically it being a destination that people can go to where all of the things we learn about, whether that's just found links, our podcast, or any articles we publish on there, will be one long flow. This is another example from Catherine from Pippin. She's the one who writes some of our blogs, and we still work with her on website projects. What she's done is quite interesting, and a few people do this, especially if you've got lots of good content, sort of which may be tucked away in the sort of archives of your blog, is to pull forward the key blogs that you want people to read. If you were to scroll down that page, you'd still see that she has her blog list there. But these are the articles that she's pulled forward, and I think there's 4 quadrants where she's pulled forward key articles that she wants people to read. And this is a good way of having a site where people aren't visiting necessarily on a regular basis to read your blog, but they're coming for the first time. Maybe they're assessing you as a potential consultant. Can be a good way of demonstrating that you know about all these things. Something very similar on community architects, and they're evolving actually a little bit more to be like the style of Pippin's. We're going through an audit process to find out what are the top articles and sort of bubble those to the top. But effectively, what they've got now is big category buttons. It starts on planning, which was one of the core areas that people wanted to know first, but they can easily switch to the other articles. And then at the top of each category, they've got the most popular articles. Which, in truth be told, may not be the most popular articles, but they are the ones that are the most useful that people want to see. And that's quite a nice way of doing it, even though we're just changing that slightly to improve that a little bit more. In fact, if you looked at the site now, it would be slightly different layout to that. So there's some different layouts and styles, but essentially what we're doing is trying to put content on the page in a way that if people land on it, they can find something that's going to be useful to them. Some writing tips, and to be honest, I find this the hardest. I think the hardest thing is building the habit for whatever you want to do, whether it's video, marketing in general, or even cooking. You need to set aside time to do it and build it into your day, and then make that habit and see if you can do that every single day or every single week or whenever the habit is. With our podcast, I have recording sessions built in every Friday. May not always record every Friday, but I've got them built in. I've got that time available. So much so that I've got a scheduled event going off into the future, so that I don't book things in the way. I've always got that time available, and that's really important. If you're going to write blogs, I would try and write them at the same time in the same place. May not always work for you, but having that regularity is going to help your brain get into gear, and you'll be ready for it, and you may even be looking forward to doing it. So I think what can work, but I'd love some feedback on it, is to create a regular event in your diary to do this. Find a place that removes distractions and make it a routine. Make a habit out of it, because you will, if you're writing blogs regularly, start to build up ideas, and you'll save those ready for when you want to write things, or video. Very similar process. Keep it focused. Go back to your audience. Write for them. Think of the people that you like and you work with on a regular basis, and write for those people. A little tip here as well is just write the snippet first. Now the snippet, it's a search engine snippet. is to think about the title and the description. Excuse me. And write those first, because that's easiest, because it's a small amount of information. Plus, it's also going to be the first thing people see. So it's actually really important to get those right, because that's what people see in search results, or maybe even on a snippet on social media. So write that first, and then that's going to give you the structure to write everything else. Oh, and the other thing, and my wife does this a lot in terms of writing, is just read a lot. You know, if you don't know what to write about, it means that maybe you don't know the subject very well, or you know too much and you don't know where to start. Something that can really help is to read a lot around that subject. So I'm trying to think of an example, but read more about that subject, and you are going to start pulling out points and forming opinions on what is important to you and your customer. So that really helps if you're stuck. And ask for action. What are you going to do at the end of a blog? Maybe it's just a blog is for a blog, so that's fine. But really, if it's a business blog, you want them to look at another page. You don't want them to bounce back. That may reduce your search optimization. You want them to do something, maybe sign up for an email, but perhaps not a box that fills the whole screen and is going to get in the way. Maybe find out more. Maybe they can book a free consultation session, buy a related product, get in touch somehow. If possible, try and get people to go to another page and do another action, even if it's something that's free. I think that's worth doing. It just brings people a little bit closer to you. Images and video, I mean, I won't spend too much time on this because we spoke about image editing last month, but it is crucially important to have images, and if you can, video on a page, even if it's just a slideshow, because it's easier for people to, so let's say you're making just a slideshow. So in the example of the Eclipse example, they could take some of those key points, those 12 guiding principles, and at the very simplest, just have them as static screens in Keynote, rendered out to a movie file and uploaded to YouTube, and then embedded in the blog. That's going to be something that people can click and play. It's nice and passive, nice and easy. But even better if you've got someone with a little bit of knowledge talking about those, or not even a little bit of knowledge, just reading it through, because it's a lot easier to listen than it is to read. Also, you've got the double whammy from a search optimization point of view that's on YouTube as well, so it's going to be found there. But obviously, like all good content, it's make it interesting, make it usable, try and add value rather than just chucking something out onto the internet. So it helps increase page views, certainly length of time that people spend on a page. It will help that. I think it's quicker when people jump onto a page from a link and they see a video. It's a lot easier for them to click and get engaged in that page than it is for them to go, load of text, I've got to read that later, and then that's death to that content. Images and video help them scan, because if you've got images, it helps them sort of draw them down the page. It can be much more visible on social feeds. So if you prepare your blog article with at least one image, then you've got something else you can share when you post it on social media, which is key. So yeah, definitely images and video important to put on. So yeah, Nikki, your idea of having video on there would be great. For people who don't know, there's a couple of websites if you want to pick up free images for your blog called Pexels and Pixabay. If you want to know more about image editing and processing and working with images, then you've got to check out our previous month's webinar, because we go through that in detail, and I go through different examples of how I edit images. Checking the license is important. I literally leave this slide in because whatever image you use, make sure you're allowed to use it. On Pixabay and Pexels, they have a license which is free for commercial use and no attribution required, which means you don't need to tell anyone that you're using it. So do check that. Also GIFs. Normally in my presentation, this would actually dance around, but having GIFs can be much more engaging because they're animated, so you're going to see them. So if not only from attracting attention point of view, but being able to sort of illustrate the article in a fun way can work quite well. Often they're overused, though. I can certainly see articles and presentations that overuse GIFs, but I do like to use them occasionally. Video, I think Selmac, I probably bang on about this a lot, but I think Selmac use video particularly well on their websites. in terms of providing information, useful information, like how to change something, how to calibrate something that's useful for their customers. But also in terms of just selling products. So they have Bruce or Anthony might be standing in front of the machine, and they'll talk about the machine, and they'll talk about what it can do. So you get to meet some of the people behind Cellmac, plus you get to the machine, see the machine working. I can't remember how many subscribers that up to now, maybe 1,700, but it really went from nothing and with a slow approach moving up dramatically. And I think they've helped the blogs as much as the blogs have helped the video. I think they really do work off the back of each other, so much so that the videos on here really drive quite, out of all the social networks, they really drive the most meaningful engagements, requests for quotes, that sort of thing. I think also, if it's easier for you to record video than it is to write, I would start with a video. So start with a piece to camera, a bit like this webinar, or just go outside and film something and talk over the top of it. Or just start talking to a voice recorder, because you might find it easier to transcribe that video than to write it. So it's worth giving that a go first. And if the video is good enough, you can use it on there too. Right, we've come to the end of the webinar. It's quite a fly through, really, that one, but I think, and some things have been covered before, certainly keywords and images, but in terms of that blogging strategy, I think it is important that, really for me, you make it a regular habit. So if you're going to do it, make sure you understand who you're talking to, you make sure understand what you're doing it for, and you do it on a regular basis, because then you will build up the sort of muscles to be able to do that. And if you can, do incorporate images and video. It's not just blogging, isn't just about writing. It's about that sort of multimedia experience. It's going to be much more interesting to people when they come to the site. So one thing I want you to do is commit to an action, whether you're watching it live or you're watching the recording. Just have a think now about something that maybe resounded with you, something you don't do that you'd like to do, or something you heard about that's interesting, and commit to developing that over the next 30 days. What are you going to do to sort of take your business forward? And now Q&A. So I'll let that open. Nikki, you've been conversational. So if there's any questions you've got on blogging, I know you do quite a lot on the Eclipse website. If you have any questions, let me know. I will actually also mention, so while you have a think about that, what I would be interested in is we've run, this is our 9th one now, 9th Inventive, I almost said it wrong again, Inventive Marketing Club. And I want to know, do you find it interesting? Do you want to, what suggestions have you got to improve it? What can we start doing over maybe the next couple of months and then into 2020 to really make this useful for you? Do you like these presentation formats? Would you prefer something that is more ad hoc and, I answer questions from you? I'm really interested in the format. Whether it's too long, whether you want shorter ones more often. I'm really up for sort of opening up this a survey, really, to find out what you think about the webinar. So what I'll do is, you don't have to put anything in now, but I will send out a survey to everyone who's on our newsletter list and on the webinar to really find out what it is that they like about what I'm doing so far and what they want to see more of. Okay, thanks, Nikki. You've got a question here. My main query is to find out how long blogs should be. So I'm looking forward to see our blog review. So yes, with Nikki, we're going through and assessing the blogs and find out which ones are working well, which ones have the most traffic in the last 12 months and over all time, which ones are still seen in social media, in search, so in Google, and what ranking they've got. Sort of really mashing all that data together to give Nikki and Karen a really good idea about what's working, and then maybe thinning those blogs down. So coming back to your specific question, though, I think length depends on your competition, essentially. If we're thinking about this just like Google, if you've got competition who are writing about a similar topic or question, who are 600 words to 700 words maybe, and they have a couple of images in there. And we go back to that idea that you want your content to be 10 times better, maybe not 10 times the length. But you could say, well, we need to write a longer article. So what can we do to add more value to this article that's going to make it more useful to people? can we add a video to this article, which basically goes through the article and explains it in video format? So someone talking to the camera, or just a voiceover with slides. I know, Nikki, that you do a lot of screen shares with a voiceover, so it could be something like that. And really trying to make that article longer, answer the question better and more deeply. So if you can put in more specific, accurate information, link off to further sites where they can get detailed information, you know, good sites where they can get solid technical information about something. And then having a video which either summarizes that or goes over the whole thing, plus images in there. And you could be looking at something like 1,500 to 2,000 words at that point for that article. Then you're going to see a difference. Your article is hopefully better. It's more interesting. It answers the question more accurately. People are going to stay on that page longer, hence the longer article. I think that helps a lot. And that may well increase your search engine optimization. But it really does depend on the competition. And I don't think there's a set rule, although some people say around 1,000 words. I think it really does depend on what you're trying to achieve and particularly who your competition is. Okay, no worries. Thank you very much, Nikki. So picking our next topic, we've got a full-on Q&A. This is an idea, and I don't know if I will I will like the idea of this when I get to it, but basically I won't prepare anything. I will get questions, maybe some questions in advance, and then take some from people throughout. And we'll just do a full-on Q&A, whatever you like. Maybe I can say my desktop is open. Let's explore anything you want. The prospect of that is quite scary for me, frankly. The other is to look through and do a sort of a bit of a deep dive on WordPress. I've certainly haven't prepared anything for this, but I'd quite like to go through WordPress and sort of break it apart. Go through some of the easy bits, go through some of the more interesting bits, look at plugins, look at the detailed side of it, really go through the whole admin as if I was instructing someone to take over the admin role on a website. Developing a customer persona. I still think there's more work we can do diving into that audience persona and maybe getting some case studies from other people to see how they use that or something else. So, Nikki, right, so you're the vocal, so WordPress, please, first. Okay, love that idea. And then a customer persona after that. Yeah, great. I think, I'm not sure where that's going to go, but I think there's a lot more we can do on that. So that's going to be my little research task. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for those. So just to wrap things up, people who are listening, if you are not a club member, if you've got your guest ticket, hopefully you found that useful. You know, the topics are different each time, generally, but we have the same sort of process where we go through and I'll try and share some interesting information with you, and where possible, people can chime in with their questions as well. I'm going to start trying to bring on some more experts in certain other industries. I certainly like to explore Instagram, which is not a sort of key topic area of mine. So I'll bring in someone like Jack McCautry on that. And explore some other areas like that. So if there are any other areas and things you're interested in, do let me know and we can start building those into the pipeline. But if you're not a club member, you can join. It's just £250 for 12 months. Any of our coaching customers get this as part of it. So it's some added value, hopefully, that we're giving back and helps continue that marketing process as we go. And yeah, that's it. So thank you so much for listening. The next club session is a little bit earlier. It's not on the Tuesday. It's on the 21st, which is a Monday of October, because I'm actually speaking at the Bath Digital Festival, and that's on the Tuesday. So I'm going to prioritize that, and I'm not going to worry about doing IMC on that day. If just a little shout out to the Bath Digital Festival. If you are around on that day, do come along. It's a really well, on that day, on that week, basically it's a fab event which takes up, it's all about digital things, which could be marketing, it could just be technology in some way, security, cybersecurity is quite big at the moment. And basically for about 20 quid, you can get an all access pass to all of those events throughout the city. Bath's a lovely place to run around as well. I'll be there certainly for the Tuesday, hoping to be there Wednesday and Thursday as well. And we're going to be doing our roundup video. But anyone else who's listening, if you can make it, do come along. Thank you very much, Nikki. Good to hear from you. Thanks very much, everyone else. And have a nice month.